Hello, we are the Grace team. I'm Lindsay Beer.
I'm Ethan Chandra.
I'm Vardani Karthik.
I'm Anjali Kota.
I'm Scarlett Pinkey.
And I'm Naina.
And we also have our amazing mentor, Corinne Vassallo.
This summer, we continued to take early steps towards the ultimate goal of understanding whether machine learning can be used to identify changes in groundwater storage using GRACE satellite data. However, this is a pretty ambitious goal, so we did narrow our focus to answering the question, can a machine learning algorithm be used to learn anything about hydrological signals seen in the GRACE data? In today's presentation, we're going to start by talking a bit about the GRACE mission and its data product, equivalent water thickness values. We will talk about the need for a model data set, in this case, the AOHIS data set, as well as explain how we can use the two in conjunction with a machine learning algorithm. We will share our results from some tests that we ran and finish with some reflections from this summer.
The GRACE mission, which stands for the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, was originally launched in 2002 and remained in orbit for 15 years. Following the conclusion of the original GRACE mission, a second mission called GRACE Follow-On was launched in 2018 and continues to produce datasets each month. The spatial resolution of the GRACE mission is available for spherical harmonic degree order 120. Both missions involved two identical satellites that measure anomalies in Earth's gravitational field by calculating the distance and change of distance, or range and range rate, between the two satellites. The measurements made by these satellites are extremely precise and can detect changes as small as 1 micron or 1/10 of the width of a human hair. The maps produced from GRACE data, as shown in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, provide detailed information about water in lakes and rivers, groundwater storage, soil moisture, and ice melt in locations all around the world. The maps that are created from GRACE data can be used to monitor droughts, flood potential, groundwater storage, and ice melt. And the observations made by the GRACE satellites can be used to understand more about rising sea levels and Earth's water cycle as a whole. Although it can be somewhat confusing to look solely at the maps created using the numerical data that is recorded by the satellites, the maps that are created using this data can be applied to many real-world situations. Producing monthly maps like the one pictured on the left-hand side of the screen can allow scientists to track surface mass changes across the planet and watch as water moves around the Earth. For instance, the region at the top of the May 2021 map that is almost entirely red is Greenland. The red values correspond to low equivalent water height values and tell researchers that during the month of May, Greenland was losing mass in the form of water. The main factor that impacts the distance between the two satellites is variations in the distribution of Earth's mass caused by moving water. Since the strength of gravity is directly proportional to the amount of mass that an object has, variations in water storage can impact the local gravitational force exerted on the GRACE satellites, which can cause the distance between the two satellites to change slightly. In the diagram to the left, the red arrow represents the satellite's horizontal speed, and the blue arrow represents the gravitational pull on the satellites based on the mass distribution of Earth. In the first panel, it can be noted that the red arrows are the same length, which denotes that the satellites are traveling at the same speed. In the second panel, the leading satellite approaches a landmass and begins to accelerate forward because of the increased gravitational pull. This causes the distance to increase between the two satellites. In the third panel, the trailing satellite begins to feel the landmass's gravitational pull and accelerates while the leading satellite passes over the landmass and begins to slow down as it is held back by the remaining gravitational force. In the final panel, we can see the distance between the two satellites return to normal as they pass over the landmass. The range and range rate values recorded by the GRACE satellites are used to calculate gravitational potential, which can be expressed using spherical harmonic coefficients. The image on the upper right-hand side of the screen depicts three kinds of spherical harmonics. Taking the sum of models like these allows for complex geoid maps, like the GRACE gravity geoid pictured in the bottom right-hand corner, to be created using GRACE data. Additionally, using the potential, the equivalent water thickness can be calculated as well. Ethan will discuss more about the equivalent water thickness in the next slide.
Equivalent water thickness, or EWT for short, is a way to represent GRACE data in a meaningful way. Instead of measurements of Earth's gravity field, these values are converted into the amount of water that is distributed throughout Earth. EWT calculates the variations in water storage deviated from the average, which is caused by the movement of water throughout Earth, measured as a thin layer of water in centimeters. And to demonstrate what an example of EWT may look like, this image below, which is a US map of EWT data over a 9-year period, represents the changes in water storage from heavy drought in severe red and abundant water storage in deep blue, with respect to the scale from -11 to 11 centimeters. And demonstrated in 2011 in the Northwestern region, we can see that there is significant water storage. In contrast, in the Southern region, we can see that there is a heavy drought.
So in the beginning, we talked about the AOHIS dataset, which we're going to be using in conjunction with the GRACE dataset for a machine learning algorithm. But what is the AOHIS dataset? AOHIS is a model dataset created by the European Space Agency, and it runs from 1995 to 2006. It models water variability with respect to time. It accounts for gravity changes from a variety of events, from atmospheric mass anomalies to ocean water, to terrestrial water storage, which is also known as the hydrosphere, to ice sheets, to solid land masses, hence the name AOHIS. Its temporal resolution is 6 hours, and its spatial resolution is spherical harmonic degree order 180. The reason for a model dataset is because the GRACE data spans from 2002 to 2016, which isn't enough time to record all possible hydrological events that could happen. While the AOHIS dataset doesn't extend much beyond that time period, the similarities between GRACE and AOHIS means that we could use the AOHIS dataset to see if any model dataset could work with the GRACE data. Anjali will talk more about the similarities and differences between GRACE and AOHIS on the next slide.
So as Vardani touched on in the last slide, we chose to use the AOHIS model dataset with the GRACE dataset in our project because both the GRACE and AOHIS datasets are showing Earth's gravitational potential expressed as spherical harmonic coefficients, which, as Ethan talked about earlier, give information about water mass variability. Both the datasets also have very similar spatial resolutions. So the main differences to keep in mind is that AOHIS is a model dataset, which means it was created by scientists, and the GRACE dataset is real satellite data. AOHIS is available from 1995 to 2006, and the GRACE mission ran from 2002 to 2017. GRACE follow-on mission ran from 2018 to the present. So now that we've introduced the data, Naina will get into the work we did this summer.
Now that my teammates have explained our datasets and what AOHIS and GRACE are, I'm going to explain what machine learning is and how machine learning is used to help scientists understand natural phenomena from all around the world. What is machine learning? Well, machine learning is a subset of AI where a system can learn from data and modify itself as it gains more experience. The computer programs focus on adapting to new data and algorithms to try and copy the way that humans learn, but without needing human interference, meaning that like a human brain, as they learn new things, their accuracy gradually improves. Why are we using machine learning? What if we use machine learning to help analyze and process satellite data more rapidly? There's often a delay between when satellites collect data and when the maps are produced, and this makes it difficult for crisis assistance and being able to see trends immediately. With machine learning, maps like the one below that Ethan had previously explained can be processed more efficiently and used more effectively.
So before we talk about our experiments from last year, let's walk through the steps to using a neural network. The first stage is called training. And this is where you give the neural network a data set that has known inputs and known outputs. And the network adjusts its weights and parameters to maximize the likelihood of the outputs matching the known input. For the testing stage, the parameters have been fixed from the training stage. And this time, you give it data that again has known inputs and known outputs, but this time it evaluates the accuracy. For actual use, you give the neural network new data that it hasn't already have the known outputs, and after it's been trained and tested. For the training stage, we will be using the AOHIS dataset, and for the testing stage, we'll be using the GRACE dataset.
Thanks to the pandemic, 3 of our team members were able to return this year, allowing us to really continue our work from last year. Throughout last summer, we developed a machine learning algorithm with the goal of sorting the GRACE data by month. We used the AOHIS data for training and the GRACE data for testing in order to see what we could learn about the GRACE data from the AOHIS data. We used 5 different regions: Australia, the Middle East, Greenland, South America, and a smaller subset, the Amazon. We chose these locations as they had strong signals, yet they were different and unique of one another. As you can see on the right side of the screen, we have plots for each of the regions, and they display accuracies after training in purple and accuracies after testing in blue. We can see that the testing accuracies are generally lower, and this is due to the fact that the weights are optimized for training, not testing. We do have slight overfitting, seen by the significant gap between testing and training, where the network is somewhat memorizing the training data, but these results are still better than randomly sorting the data by month, which would yield about 8% accuracy. From our experiments last year, we are able to answer yes to our question of, can a machine learning algorithm be used to learn anything about hydrological signals seen in the GRACE data? This year, we used convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, primarily in our machine learning part of the project, and as inputs, we used images of grid maps, such as the one seen on the left side of the screen. This is an example of South America, and these inputs are in the form of RGB pixel values. The goal of our neural network was to match images of grid maps to the month that they were taken. So looking at this from a more general view, convolutional neural networks are composed of convolutional layers, which help pick up on features of the image. Then through a process of pooling, these features are resized as the convolutional neural network runs. Eventually, this leads to outputs of matching the images of grid maps to the corresponding month. The neural network does this by creating a probability of the likelihood that the image corresponds to each month. The highest probability is considered the accurate output by the neural network.
While we're still working towards the ultimate goal of understanding whether machine learning methods can be used to identify changes in groundwater storage using GRACE satellite data, this summer we focused specifically on answering the question, does the input data type have an impact on the effectiveness of our machine learning algorithm? So last year we worked with images of equivalent water thickness data, and this year we experimented on feeding our network matrices of equivalent water thickness values, which Lindsay will talk about.
So this year, like Anjali said, instead of feeding our neural network RGB pixel values, we're feeding it matrices of equivalent water thickness in centimeters. The architecture is still almost identical, and we're still sorting the data by month, so this allows us to see whether the input type alters the results.
After we determined and developed our input data, we had to consider the structure of our model known as the convolutional neural network architecture. The CNN architectures are composed of various parameters, which affect the architecture and can change the accuracy by varying degrees. Therefore, one of the main extensive experiments that were conducted was tweaking and testing the values of these parameters, such as pooling size, number of epochs, and many more that are not listed here, to develop an effective model that produces acceptable accuracies necessary to develop conclusions.
After conducting all of our experiments, these are our results. Starting with South America, both the images and matrices reached a training accuracy of 100%, although the matrices test reached a higher testing accuracy than that of the image test by about 8%. South America has such a high training accuracy because it has such a large signal, and because the AOHIS data is very similar to the GRACE data for this region. This can be seen on the plot at the bottom of the screen, where the blue line representing the GRACE data and the red line representing the AOHIS data lie almost on top of each other. We also observed a more specific region of South America, the Amazon. The matrices for the Amazon had a higher testing accuracy of 65% compared to the image testing accuracy of 58%. But they are comparable because the training accuracy of the image is slightly higher than that of the matrix.
Both Australia and the Middle East were the regions with the largest increase in testing accuracies between the two input types. The matrices gained close to or more than a 10% increase in testing, with Australia having a 22.44% increase and the Middle East having an 8.34% increase, indicating that the input data does actually have an effect on the accuracies.
And the last region we looked at was Greenland. So as you can see, the image results and the matrix results were pretty comparable, both having testing accuracies around 20%, which is what we averaged for all of our tests for Greenland. What is interesting to notice is that these testing accuracies are much lower than all of the other regions. And it's due to the fact that there's a downward linear trend caused by ice melting and leaving the region that we can see in the equivalent water thickness plot at the bottom. And also the difference in relative means between the AOHIS and GRACE data is so great that learning really isn't happening within our network, which is why we see such low testing accuracies.
Ultimately, we found that in nearly all of the regions we tested, using matrices yielded results that were as good or better than the image data results. In both the matrix results and the image data results from the regions Australia, South America, the Amazon, and the Middle East, training accuracies were in the mid to high 90s and even up to 100. Testing accuracies were more varied between the matrix and image results, as the testing accuracies for matrices were frequently 5 to 10% higher than the image training accuracies. This is significant because the testing accuracy correlates to how well the network generalizes. Higher testing accuracies mean that the network is better at learning from the given data and applying what it has learned to data that it is not familiar with during the testing stage. However, our results for the region Greenland were inconclusive because learning did not occur. As Anjali explained earlier, Greenland's low testing accuracy, which hovered at around 19 to 22%, can be attributed to a downward linear trend caused by melting ice leaving the region. It is also important to note that the training times for matrices were much lower than the training times for images. This can be attributed to the relative sizes of input of the matrices and images because, while the images are represented as tensors with a depth of 3, matrix data is only 2-dimensional and has no depth, which means that the input for the matrix data is at least 3 times smaller than the input for the image data. Based on these results, we are interested in learning more about how changing the input data type impacts the training and testing accuracies of different kinds of experiments beyond just sorting grid maps into months.
Now that we've concluded the results section of our presentation, we're going to get into some reflections from this summer. For me, having the opportunity to learn and utilize machine learning has been amazing. The coding opportunities are limited where I live, and being able to develop skills that I can use in a career has been immensely beneficial. I have also gotten better at presenting my work in a clear and concise manner, which is very important for any number of situations.
Participating in this program gave me the opportunity to meet and work in a team with new people. Together, we all worked to overcome problems, whether it was errors in our code or questions about what we were learning. Over the summer, I have gained so much more confidence in myself and learned so many new things, like what neural networks are, how to run machine learning tests, changing architectures, and much more about the data collected by GRACE.
Before C's, I had an interest in environmental science, but I also knew my strengths were in STEM. And this program really showed me how I can combine both my interests and my skills, and inspired me to pursue computer science in college with an environmental point of view.
C's has been an absolutely incredible experience and has opened my eyes to a world of science that I had not previously been exposed to. Working with GRACE data has allowed me to learn more about how earth science intersects with other fields of science, such as machine learning and Python, 2 subjects that I've always been interested in, but never really had the chance to work with directly. Now that C's has come to an end, I feel that I have gained confidence in working with unfamiliar subjects and sharing my thoughts in a team setting.
Prior to joining C's, I always thought about getting into machine learning, but I didn't know what to learn or where to start. However, C's has provided that gateway to gain a deeper understanding about machine learning and STEM. C's is one of the programs that give high-level educational opportunities to young high school students, where we get to use real data to research and develop conclusions about our experiments. I thoroughly enjoyed learning about the GRACE mission and how machine learning can be applied to environmental data. And like Anjali, also considered going into computer science for college.
C's has taught me how to communicate better with my peers, and I have much more confidence in my presentation skills as well. On the technical side, I have a much deeper understanding of machine learning, and I can understand the terminology and what the vocabulary means. I also have learned so much about the GRACE satellite and what the data shows about our world and how it changes over time.
We would like to extend a special thanks to Ms. Baggio, Ms. Miller, and our amazing mentor, Corinne Vassallo, as well as the entire C's program. Any questions?